to our live coverage of the latest mission from Vandenberg Space Force Base. Emil Robinson Smith will be performing our commentary for the duration of this coverage. We're broadcasting, as we always do, from the Spaceflight Now News Bureau here at NASA's Kennedy Space Center. SpaceX is currently fueling its Falcon 9 rocket at Space Launch Complex 4 East, or SLIC 4E, there at Vandenberg. That means they are committing to at least making an attempt to launch today. That liftoff time, you see there on your screen, 5:07 a.m. Pacific, 8:07 a.m. Eastern, 12:07 UTC for our friends joining around the world. We are joined, as always, this morning by our Spaceflight Now editor, Stephen Young, who's running the technical operations of our broadcast. Our photographers, Adam Bernstein and Michael Kane, have the morning off since this is a West Coast launch. They'll be back in action, though, later on today as we are tracking another Falcon flight. That mission, Starlink 10-3, looking for a liftoff, just about 5:10 p.m. Eastern, if all remains on track with that mission. We'll have much more to talk about that later on this evening, late afternoon. As we're kicking things off, want to first off thank the nearly 1,000 of you who are joining with us live this morning. If you haven't already, be sure to hit that like button for us. It would certainly be much appreciated and allow some more folks to find their way into this live launch coverage. Also want to give a tip of the hat to our wonderful moderators helping us out this morning, Clistia Lee and fairly recently minted moderator Mark Otto joining us both this morning. Hello to you. Appreciate you hanging with us today. And if you do see any of the other mods pop on in, be sure to give them a big old hello. We're also supported here on YouTube by a very wonderful channel member community. So thanks to folks like Patty Chichil, Sulfur for Lunch, Well-Reasoned Superhawk, The Rocket Girl, James Fowley, Angela Cagle, and many others. Channel membership comes with a number of perks, including discounts at our online shop, that is shop.spaceflightnow.com. Access to member-only videos here on YouTube, and of course, the ability to watch all of our launch liftoff moments here in 4K, the Cape. Currently T-minus 26 minutes, 18 seconds and counting. Certainly lots going on in preparation for this launch this morning. As mentioned, fueling is underway on the Falcon 9 rocket. We'll talk more about that in a second, but do want to briefly pop over to things here on the East Coast. It has been a busy morning, not so much for SpaceX this morning, but rather for Blue Origin. Taking a look at a picture we snapped this morning from one of our cameras out there at the press site. You can see new Blue Origin's New Glenn first stage booster, the GS-1, rolling on by the vehicle assembly building from our vantage point there at the press site. That smaller building just beyond it, that's the Launch Control Center. The VAB just off to the left of that. The booster with its it's 7 BE-4 engines there at the base of the booster, rolling on out to Blue Origin's facilities at Launch Complex 36 at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station in preparation for its first launch, which is coming up somewhere in the November timeframe, which, being that it is October 30th, Halloween Eve, if you will. That launch is coming up pretty close to right around the corner. So lots to talk about with Blue Origin in the very, very near future. So looking forward to that. Just wanted to let you know that that was literally and figuratively in motion this morning as well. Coming back to our community for a second, want to thank Well-Reasoned Superhawk, one of our channel members, for gifting 5 Spaceflight Now memberships. Really appreciate that, Superhawk. To our 5 newest channel members, welcome aboard. We're glad to have you with us. If you haven't already, be sure to thank Superhawk in the live chat. We hope you stick around with channel membership. Also, you can be like Damian Williams. If you have a comment or question or just want to offer a little support this morning, you can use the YouTube Super Chat feature. And not only will you be giving us some interesting things to talk about as we continue on through the countdown, but you'll be supporting what we do here at Spaceflight Now, and that is always very much appreciated. So again, thanks to Damian Williams for $5 Super Chat, offered some words of support this morning, saying simply, y'all are awesome. We think you're awesome, Damian. I appreciate you helping us do the awesome work that we do here at Spaceflight Now. Now currently T-minus 23 minutes, 36 seconds and counting. SpaceX has passed a few different fueling milestones so far. Let's go ahead and talk about where they stand currently and what is remaining on deck for the remainder of the countdown timeline. At about the T-minus 38-minute mark is when the SpaceX launch director will nominally give the go-ahead for the start of fueling. This is an electronic poll, so they can take it a little bit earlier if they feel like they're in a good position to move forward with launch operations. Fueling itself, though, starts at the T-minus 35-minute mark. The loading of RP1, or rocket-grade kerosene, on board the Falcon 9's first and second stages. At the same time, liquid oxygen starts flowing on board the Falcon 9's first stage. T-minus 30 minutes, they start loading cryogenic helium onto the pressure vessels on the Falcon 9's first stage. The helium is used to pressurize the main propellant tanks during flight. Same will be true on the second stage about 5 or so minutes later. T-minus 23 minutes, loading of second stage RP1 concludes. Then at T-minus 20 minutes and 50 seconds, the strong back chill down process begins. That's where they're cooling the feed lines prior to second stage LOX load. When we have eyes on the rocket, we see that manifest as the so-called big vent right about T-minus 20 minutes and 20 seconds. And you will see that later today when we talk about the Starlink 10-13 mission lifting off from Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. T-minus 16 minutes is when second stage LOX load begins. Then at T-minus 7 minutes, they'll start the chill down of the 9 Merlin 1D engines at the base of the Falcon 9 rocket. The process involves flowing a small amount of liquid oxygen through the plumbing and turbo pumps, and it helps protect the engines from the risk of thermal shock and damage during the startup sequence. About 6 minutes prior to liftoff, the first stage kerosene tank should be full. Then at T-minus 4.5 minutes, we'll see the strong back retract sequence begin. That starts with the clamp arms underneath the payload fairings opening up, and then the transporter erector for the strong back. Here at Vandenberg reclines about 13 degrees away from the Falcon 9 rocket. It stays in that position until liftoff. At that point, it pulls back in a much more rapid fashion to clear the way for the vertical climb of the Falcon 9. T-minus 3 minutes, the first stage liquid oxygen tank should be full. LOX load on the second stage wraps up about a minute or so later, at which point the Falcon 9 is fully loaded with 1 million pounds of propellant. In the final 60 seconds, as we hear the call that the Falcon 9 is in startup, control of the countdown is handed over from the ground sequencer to the Falcon 9's onboard flight computers. The propellant tanks are brought up to flight pressure. SpaceX launch director will give their go for launch at 45 seconds out. The engine ignition command is issued at T-minus 3 seconds. And if all 9 Merlin engines are healthy and ignite, the command will be given for the hold down clamps to release the Falcon 9 rocket for a T0 liftoff. Coming up, T-minus 20 minutes, 8 seconds and counting. In other words, at 5:07 a.m. Pacific, 8:07 a.m. Eastern, 12:07 UTC. Now currently T-minus 19 minutes, 25 seconds and counting. Had we eyes on the rocket at this particular moment, we would be seeing the so-called big vent in full swing. Currently chilling those feed lines prior to second stage LOX load. We often get the question of where this rocket is going, so let's go ahead and answer that now and talk a little trajectory, shall we? Falcon 9 rocket set to lift off from Space Launch Complex 4 East, or SLC 4E. This mission, Starlink 9-9, heading to, as you might be able to guess, the 9th shell of the Starlink constellation, which, for the purposes of this part of the conversation, means it's flying in a southeasterly trajectory along the coast of California and Mexico. Following the arc of that orange line there, you'll see the Falcon 9 first stage booster, which today is tail number B1075, going for its 14th flight. That will touch down on the drone ship. Of course, I Still Love You. That's coming up about 8.25 minutes into this launch once it does lift off from SLC 4E. If all is successful with this booster landing, this will be the 106th booster landing for, of course, I Still Love You, in the 283rd drone ship landing for a booster. 360th booster landing to date so far. SpaceX will also endeavor to recover the payload fairings, as they usually do, or usually attempt to, as much as possible. They save about $6 million per recovery effort, so it is exceedingly valuable for them to do so. As you see in this picture here from a SpaceX presentation earlier this year, they splashed down in the waters, in this case of the Pacific Ocean, under the support of parachutes, and they'll be brought aboard a recovery vessel. I believe over here on the West Coast, they use the vessel called Go Beyond. SpaceX is working to certify both its fairing halves as well as its first stage boosters for up to 40 flights apiece. So far, of the boosters SpaceX still has currently flying, its launch leader is B1067, which currently has 22 flights. Its overall launch leaders were B1061 and B1062, which reached 23 flights each. As far as the recovery game, though, SpaceX is not the only ones in this domain for too much longer. As you mentioned, that New Glenn first stage booster that rolled out this morning, Blue Origin will endeavor to do something similar to SpaceX and use a marine asset to recover the booster in a similar fashion using a propulsive landing. Blue Origin's recovery vessel is called Jacqueline. It's been running through a number of tests in preparation for its first booster landing attempt, which Blue Origin has said that they intend to make as part of its NG-1 mission, or the first launch of New Glenn, coming up again sometime next month is the current stated plan. Taking a look at weather conditions out near the pad at Vandenberg, you can see this satellite view, or this view from GOES West. Taking a look at some of the clouds in the area over the Golden State, you can see weather looking not too bad around Vandenberg. So hopefully for those in the vicinity, conditions will be good enough that you'll be able to see this Falcon 9 as it takes off. Same for the neighbors to the west of California. If you do happen to catch a good picture or a video of the Falcon 9 rocket, be sure to tag us on social media. You can find us on X by simply searching at Spaceflight Now. If you're not on X, we're also on Threads as well as Facebook. Now, T-minus 14 minutes, 45 seconds and counting. At this point, SpaceX should be about a little more than a minute into the loading of liquid oxygen on board the Falcon 9's second stage. Taking a look at our live chat here, it seems like folks are in a gifting mood today, which we certainly appreciate. Want to thank a whole host of folks who've been giving Spaceflight Now memberships. Let's see, Joseph Williams Storer gifted a membership. Appreciate you, Joseph. Mark Otto, one of our wonderful channel members and moderator, gifted 5. Silver for Lunch gifted 5, and so did our other moderator hanging with us this morning, Clistia Lee. So to our 16 newest channel members, welcome aboard to you all. We're glad to have you with us. If you haven't already, be sure to thank Joseph, Mark, Sulfur, and Clistia, their generosity this morning. We hope you stick around with channel membership. I also want to thank Susan Moat Sharkey for a $5 super chat. Really appreciate you, Susan. Another one of our wonderful channel members. And speaking of wonderful channel members, Patty Chichil, the $2 super chat, saying welcome new members and everyone else to hashtag Team Space. And a welcome to you all. Now T-minus 12 minutes, 49 seconds and counting. On board this Falcon flight are another batch of Starlink satellites for SpaceX's growing constellation. So far this year, SpaceX has launched a little more than 1,500 Starlink satellites. This mission today will be their 70th dedicated Starlink mission of the year, and the 113th time, or excuse me, 133rd time they've launched the Starlink V2 mini satellites to date. On board this particular Falcon 9 rocket are 20 Starlink satellites, including 13 that feature the direct-to-cell capability. SpaceX continues to build out that part of its infrastructure. With this launch, they'll have sent up 272 of those direct-to-cell Starlink satellites, getting a chance to do some on-the-ground sort of wide testing to an extent of those in the aftermath of both Hurricanes Helene and Milton, which obviously had quite significant impacts across the Southeast. And so SpaceX got permission from the Federal Communications Commission here in the United States to allow its DTC service to be enabled for those impacted areas for, I believe it was a 15-day window following the acceptance of the request for each hurricanes, Milton and Helene, both of which have expired by now. No doubt, though, with their partnership with T-Mobile, SpaceX got a lot of valuable data from that sort of serendipitous, in a way, beta test. A silver lining, I suppose, if you want to call it that, for the impact of the storm, and hopefully for those who were impacted that were able to use the direct-to-cell capabilities. If that happens to fit your description, hop in the comments section, or, well, if you're watching this later, you can hop in the comments section of this video, but if you're watching live, go ahead and let us know if you happen to be impacted by either of the hurricanes, and notice if you're on the T-Mobile service and you were in an area with normally poor reception. If you happen to see it switch over from your regular just T-Mobile to saying T-Mobile plus SpaceX, that would indicate that the direct-to-cell capability was taking over and enabling some basic functionality. Coming back to the Starlink satellites themselves, each clocks in at about 1,760 pounds, or about 800 kilograms. With their solar panels unfurled, they have a wingspan of about 100 feet, or 30 meters. They use argon Hall thrusters, as opposed to the previously used Krypton Hall thrusters for in-orbit maneuvering. They were built in Redmond, Washington, and they'll be deployed at about 180 miles, or 290 kilometers in altitude, at a 53-degree inclination. Thanks to the folks at Black Sky and HEO for capturing this on-orbit view of a Starlink V2 mini satellite, where you can see those solar panels extending from the body of the spacecraft. This, I believe, is still, at this point, our best on-orbit view of a Starlink V2 mini. So appreciate the folks over there for both capturing and sharing this image with the public of one of the most prolific satellites currently orbiting our little blue planet here. Now T-minus 8 minutes, 30 seconds and counting. We're now less than a minute and a half away from the chill down of the 9 Merlin 1D engines. That process gets underway at about T-minus 7 minutes.
Toda a linha Onix 2025, condição imperdível com taxa zero na troca do seu usado.
Já imaginou sua vida com Chevrolet? Segurança tem de sobra. São 6 airbags para proteger todo mundo.
Mion, todo mundo quer proteção para a família.
Acesse o site ou vá até uma concessionária.
Chevrolet.
Experimente Downy, perfume inconfundível que vai muito além do varal.
Taking a look back at the live chat, first off, I want to thank the more than 4,300 of you who are joining with us live. If you haven't already, we'd certainly appreciate it if you would do us the kind courtesy of hitting that like button. Allow some more folks to find their way into this live launch coverage. I also see another one of our moderators, Aussie Space Girl, has joined us. Been a channel member here now for 20 months. What a wonderful 20 months it has been. And she says, being a moderator is our pleasure. We certainly appreciate you. I also want to thank Waco Jones for a $2 super chat. Thank you, Waco. And Ebony Locks for a $5 super chat. Thank you, Ebony, who says simply, thank you. As we are awaiting eyes on the booster coming up in just about 2 or so minutes, let's go ahead and talk about this booster's history. Again, this is B-1075, looking to make its 14th flight today. So while we have time, let's go ahead and talk about its flight history so far. Making its first jaunt to space back on January 19th of 2023 with the Starlink batch. That was Starlink Group 2-4, sending up 51 Starlink satellites. That was followed up by a mission for the U.S. Space Development Agency, part of the United States Space Force. This was an early test fleet of some of their satellites as part of what they call Tranche Zero. Then we were back over to Starlink land for a while for this booster. It's Starlink 2-9 on May 10th, Starlink 5-7 on June 22nd, Starlink 6-20 on August 8th, 7-3 on September 25th, 7-6 on October 23rd. We hop over to the SAR satellites number 2 and 3. These are German reconnaissance satellites that were launched back on Christmas Eve of last year. So there, remember that one. I was visiting family and sincerely hoping that that launch would come and go in time to preserve Christmas with the family, and thankfully it did lift off on Christmas Eve and thankfully not Christmas Day. That was followed up by another batch of Starlink satellites, Starlink 7-12 on January 29th. Starlink 7-16 on March 19th. Starlink 9-2 on June 24th. Rideshare Mission Transporter 11 on August 16th. And most recently, Starlink 9-17 on September 20th. And with that, we bring you views of that booster we were just talking about.
Strong back retract has started.
And with that good call, strong back retract sequence has been initiated. So you can see good pad views here at Vandenberg this morning, as indicated by the GOES West satellite. Looks like very little cloud cover over Vandenberg and really no fog to speak of this morning, which is quite a nice change of pace. Certainly can be socked in there at the pad. You see now the transporter erector beginning to move away from the Falcon 9 rocket. Again, it will recline about 13 degrees away from the vehicle. Now T-minus 3 minutes, 17 seconds and counting. The next call we will hear in just a handful of seconds here is that first stage liquid oxygen load is complete.
Stage 1 LOX load is complete.
Good call there. They should finish fueling the Falcon 9 rocket within the next minute. That will wrap up with second stage LOX load.
Stage 2 LOX load is complete.
Good call from SpaceX. We should soon be seeing the ground gas closeouts, as now the Falcon 9 is fully loaded with 1 million pounds of propellant. And as you see there, with that call, they're purging the remaining liquid oxygen from the feed lines there. In about 15 seconds, we should hear that the Falcon 9 is in startup.
Falcon 9 is in startup.
that the countdown is now headed over from the ground sequencer to the onboard flight computers. We are awaiting the flight director's go for launch momentarily.
Go for launch.
And with that good call, we are now just 40 seconds away from the liftoff of this Falcon 9 rocket. So we'll come back with commentary on the other side of liftoff. But for now, let's listen in to the remainder of the count.
T-minus 30 seconds. T-minus 15 seconds. T-minus 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, ignition. And liftoff Falcon 9. Go SpaceX. Go Starlink. Stage 1 propulsion is nominal.
Vehicle is pitching downrange. Power and telemetry nominal. Falcon 9 is supersonic. Max Q.
And a good series of calls from SpaceX so far as the Falcon 9 rocket now a little more than a minute into flight, passing through max Q, the point of greatest aerodynamic pressure on the vehicle. In the next several seconds, we'll be hearing the call for the Merlin vacuum engine chill. As that comes up, we'll be looking...
back chill.
There you go. Now we're looking for a few different events in fairly rapid succession. We'll see first stage main engine cutoff at about T plus 2 minutes and 25 seconds. That'll be followed a few seconds later by stage separation. Then that Merlin vacuum engine you just heard referenced will ignite, followed by a payload fairing deployment. And the Starlink satellites will be exposed to the vacuum of space. Now 2 minutes to flight.
Nominal trajectory.
A good call that the Falcon 9 flying along its expected flight path as we're coming up on MECO.
Main engine cut off.
Stage separation confirmed.
And back ignition.
All good calls and good visuals from the Falcon 9's onboard flight computers. The Falcon 9 first stage booster now flying along its own trajectory, as well as the second stage with a good burn of that Merlin vacuum engine. You can see some of the lights of the California and Mexico coastlines.
Bearing separation confirmed.
No Starlink satellites now exposed to the vacuum of space, including 13 with the direct-to-cell capability. Now T plus 3 minutes, 22 seconds into flight. Coming up next will be the first stage entry burn, which will last about 25 seconds in total. That burn beginning less than 3 minutes from now at T plus 6 minutes and 1 second.
Both vehicles on a nominal trajectory.
Now T plus 4 minutes, 24 seconds and counting. As you heard, everything remaining nominal with this mission so far. We're now just a little more than a minute away from the start of that entry burn. As you can see, the Falcon 9 first stage booster has passed its apogee, the highest point in its arc, now beginning to make its way back down towards the drone ship. Of course, I still love you. Getting some toggling views on the Falcon booster there. This one looking up through the inner stage at the top of the booster. On the right-hand side of your screen, you're seeing alternating views looking at both sides of the Merlin vacuum engine, giving engineers on the ground good visual in real time. Just one of the data points of the performance.
Stage 1, entry burn startup.
Princípio.
Desde que eu comprei meu Citroën Basalt, Murilo vive me pedindo carona, olha aí.
Eu ia perder a chance de andar no carro com um design como esse.
Ainda bem que tem muito espaço, né? Isso é espaçoso.
É só uma caroninha até o aeroporto. Vou espelhar o meu GPS aqui, ó. O motor desse a gente vai chegar em 2 minutos. Caroninha pra floricultura. Caroninha pra praia. Mercado, muito obrigado. Pet shop.
Sapatinho.
Good call for the start of that entry burn, which you see is now underway. Should last just a few more seconds here.
Stage 1, entry burn shutdown.
Nominal trajectory.
With the conclusion of the entry burn, confirmation from SpaceX that that first stage still following the projected flight
Stage
path.
1 FTS is safe.
With that call, the flight termination system has been saved. It's no longer needed at this stage of the flight. Now coming up on 7 minutes into this mission, the landing burn now about 45 seconds away.
Stage 2
Stage 1,
FTS is safe.
transonic. Stage 1, landing burn.
Landing burn underway. We should be getting views from the drone ship, of course, is still love
Stage 2
you
is in terminal guidance.
momentarily.
Stage 1, landing leg deploy. Stage 1, landing confirmed.
And with that, for a 14th time, B-1075 is safely down on the drone ship.
MVAC shutdown.
Nominal orbit insertion.
And some good final calls from SpaceX for this part of the mission. Good orbital insertion. At this point, the Falcon 9's upper stage will continue to coast until T plus 53 minutes, 47 seconds, at which point there will be a brief 1-second burn that will help circularize the orbit and prepare for the Starlink satellites to be deployed at T plus 1 hour and 40 seconds into the mission. And with that, we're going to go ahead and begin to wind things down today, taking a look at our mission stats as they currently stand. Now we've got a good liftoff and a touchdown of booster B-1075, rounding out its 14th flight to date. This was also the 387th Falcon 9 launch to date, the 102nd Falcon 9 launch of 2024. This marked the 332nd Falcon booster reflight, or the launch of a booster that has flown at least once. This was SpaceX's 107th launch of the year so far, including, of course, 2 Falcon Heavy rockets and 3 Starship flights. This was SpaceX's 122nd orbital launch within the last 365 days, the 96th orbital launch from Slick 4E, and the 164th overall orbital launch from that pad to date. Moving on to some recovery stats, this marked the 106th landing on the booster on the drone ship. Of course, I still love you. That creating the 283rd SpaceX drone ship landing and the 360th Falcon booster landing so far. Again, with New Glenn from Blue Origin coming up right around the corner, we'll soon have some new booster landing stats to track as they start making their attempts and hopefully their successful booster landings. Finally, onto some industry stats. This was the 37th orbital launch from California this year, the 111th from U.S. soil. This was the 121st launch from U.S. Rocket Company, the 198th orbital launch from around the world. Of course, a trio of Chinese taikonauts lifted off yesterday, arriving at the Tiangong space station. I'll have a brief handover with the taikonauts of Shenzhou 18 before that trio departs, heads back to Earth. There have also been 6 orbital launch mishaps around the world, so here's where our pie chart currently stands. The U.S., with its 121 launches on the year, still holding 62% of the pie. China now notching 27% with its 52 missions on the year. Russia so far with 11. Japan, that's actually a typo. That should be 5 launches for Japan. India and Iran with 3 apiece. The European Space Agency with 2, and North Korea with 1 launch attempt and launch failure on the year. And with that, my friends, we'll bring our live launch coverage to a close. Want to sincerely thank all of you for being with us today. Big thanks to our wonderful moderators in the live chat, to Callistia Lee, Aussie Space Girl, Mark Otto. You've all been fabulous as always. Big thanks to our channel member community as well for supporting what we do here at Spaceflight Now. Thanks as always to our Spaceflight Now editor, Stephen Young, for running the technical operations of this broadcast. And most of all, thanks to you for wherever you are watching from today, whether live or on a replay of this mission at your own leisure. Again, if you are watching this live, don't forget we are still tracking one more Falcon flight, this time from the East Coast, coming up later on this evening. Starlink 10-13, currently looking at a departure time of 5:10 p.m. Eastern, 21:10 UTC for our friends around the world. Be sure to subscribe to Spaceflight Now on your way out the digital door if you haven't already. And folks, I hope you have a wonderful start to your Wednesday. Appreciate you kicking things off with us here at Spaceflight Now. Go grab a coffee, tea, or whatever breakfast item will get you going in the morning. And I hope you have a fabulous day until we see you again, hopefully, for our discussion of the launch of Starlink 10-13. For all of us here at Spaceflight Now, I'm Will Robinson Smith. Remember, be good to yourselves, be good to others. We will see you next time, folks. And until then, bye-bye.